I'm Maya Ellis, 33, a freelance editor and the eldest daughter in my family. The foyer of the community center smelled faintly of floral candles and someone's cheap perfume. I stood just outside the doors of the rented event hall, where my sister's engagement party was already in full swing. Laughter spilled through the double doors, through the frosted glass. I saw shadows of people raising glasses, leaning into hugs, swaying to soft jazz, but my name wasn't on the guest list. "Sorry, I don't see a Maya Ellis here," the woman at the check-in table said, peering at her tablet and adjusting her rhinestone glasses. Her name tag read, Brenda, Volunteer Coordinator. "You said you were family." I nodded slowly. "I'm her sister." Brenda looked up, her face tightening. "Well, maybe there was a mix-up. But I can't let you in without approval from the host or their planner." Behind her, through the glass, I saw my mother glide past with a tray of cupcakes, smiling like we were a perfect family. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, not since the lie. "I helped raise her," I said, quieter now. She used to call me her second mom. Brenda offered me a polite shrug. "Sorry, hun." I stepped back onto the concrete steps. Evening wind whipped past my arms. I hadn't brought a coat. The street lamp cast my shadow long and jagged behind me, like it wasn't sure which direction I belonged in. I stood still, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Hey, if you've ever felt erased from your own family, like your name was the one they wanted to forget, I'd really like to know I'm not alone. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been on the outside looking in, I hope you'll subscribe. Maybe this story will speak to something you've carried too. A woman in a navy pantsuit came rushing down the hallway. Clipboard. Earpiece. Very important. "Excuse me. Are you Maya Ellis?" she asked breathlessly. I blinked. "Yes. Please come with me. The groom's father asked for you personally." I followed her back through the doors, down a corridor, into the ballroom. Heads turned. I could feel my presence dragging silence behind me like a cape. There, near the dance floor, a tall man in a slate gray suit was waving. "Maya, there you are. You're the Maya, aren't you?" His voice echoed across the hall. Whispers bloomed. "She's the one, didn't she? I thought she was out of the picture." Then he raised a hand to the crowd and smiled wide. "Everyone, meet the woman who edited my last 3 bestsellers, my son's future sister-in-law. And if I'm not mistaken, once babysat my daughter-in-law every single summer." I didn't move. The music had stopped. My sister, Rachel, stood frozen near the cake, pale, fingers tight around her champagne flute. The room was airless. My name finally existed in their mouths again. I stood there under the weight of 200 eyes. The silence wasn't comforting, it was expectant, uneasy. I could hear someone cough. A spoon clinked against a glass. The moment had frozen, the air held in place by confusion and politeness. Rachel didn't move. Not at first. She kept her face composed, as she always had, but I could tell by the way her left eyebrow twitched, by how her fingers whitened around the glass that she hadn't seen this coming. The groom's father clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Come. Don't just stand there like a stranger." I felt my feet unstick from the floor. I walked forward slowly, past the wide stares of relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Past our Aunt Melody, who once whispered that I took up too much space in the room. Past our cousin Dean, who never answered my texts but always tagged Rachel in family group photos. They all parted from me like water around a forgotten stone. When I reached the man Walter, the groom's father, he pulled me into a side hug like we were old friends. "You didn't tell anyone you were that Maya," he whispered, amused. I smiled tightly. Didn't think it would matter. He laughed and turned to the crowd again. Let's hear it for the unsung heroes in our lives. Huh. There was a smattering of polite applause, confused and hesitant. He leaned in and said, "You're at my table tonight." I nodded. "Thank you." I felt Rachel's eyes on me as I walked away. Her expression didn't break, but her gaze followed me with the precision of a blade. At Walter's table, I sat beside his wife Judith, soft-spoken and curious, who leaned in as I adjusted my seat. "So you two grew up together?" she asked, motioning toward Rachel. "Yes," I said. "I'm her older sister. You seem very close to Walter, but I don't think I've seen you at any of the other events." I hesitated. "No, I haven't been around much lately." Judith's smile faltered, but she said nothing more. She turned her attention back to the center of the room, where a band had resumed playing, as if nothing had happened. Dinner was served: roasted chicken with cranberry glaze, garlic green beans, and herbed rice pilaf. I picked at it. The silverware felt heavy in my hand. I barely heard the conversations at the table. My eyes kept drifting toward Rachel, who laughed with the bridesmaids a little too brightly, nodded a little too often. Halfway through dessert, Rachel stood and tapped her glass. The microphone was passed to her, and she accepted it with a practiced smile. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began. "You've all meant so much to me, especially in helping me grow through, well, a difficult childhood." She paused, scanning the room. Then her eyes landed on me. "As many of you know, I was abandoned when I was just a little girl, and the people who stepped up, like my amazing fiancé and his family, became the family I never had." There was a small hush. I felt the blood leave my face. "I was alone for a long time," she continued, "but now, I'm surrounded by love." My fork slipped from my fingers. It hit the plate with a sound that made Judith flinch beside me. "She didn't say that," Judith whispered. "She can't mean you." I couldn't speak. I just stared at Rachel, who met my gaze with cool indifference. When the applause came, it was scattered but enthusiastic. I stood and quietly excused myself from the table. I walked back toward the coat room, though I still had no coat. I just needed space. Air. Behind me, I heard someone follow. A voice called softly, "Maya." I turned. Walter stood there, holding 2 drinks. "You okay?" he asked. That speech. I shook my head. She's been telling that story for years. That I left, that I disappeared, that she was raised alone. And I was 16 when our dad left. Our mom collapsed. I took care of her, Rachel. I walked her to school. I made her meals. I missed every party, every date, every opportunity to be a teenager. Walter was silent for a moment. "Why don't people know that I swallowed?" "Because I never said anything." I thought, if I just kept going, it wouldn't matter. He handed me one of the drinks. "It matters now." Later that evening, as the dance floor spun and guests began slipping off their shoes, I slipped into the tech booth at the back of the room. The DJ was busy adjusting levels, nodding to the beat. "Hey," I said, "can I ask for a quick switch on the next song?" He turned, suspicious. "What kind of switch?" I handed him a USB. It's just a family video. 5 minutes. It's a surprise for the bride." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure she knows about it? She'll recognize it." He hesitated, then took the drive. "You want music after yes?" I said. "But wait a minute after it ends." I returned to my seat. Judith raised her brows at me. I didn't explain. I just folded my hands on the table. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed again. The crowd quieted. "We've got a surprise moment queued up from the family," the DJ said over the speaker. "Bride's side." The screen behind the band lit up. Static. Then a shaky image of a living room. Rachel was 6. I was 16. She wore butterfly wings. I wore my dad's old hoodie. She ran into the room laughing. The camera followed. Maya. Look. I can fly, she shouted on screen. Careful, I said. Laughing. You're going to crash. The crowd chuckled. In the video. Rachel tripped and scraped her knee. She cried. I scooped her up, kissed her forehead, carried her to the bathroom. You're okay. Ray. My voice said. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. On screen. Her little arms wrapped around my neck. You're the best sister ever. The screen went black. Nobody clapped. In the heavy silence, I stood and walked to the center of the room. My voice was clear, even though my heart raced. I didn't abandon her. I was her mother when our mother couldn't be. I didn't tell that story, because I didn't think I had to. I looked straight at Rachel. She sat frozen, her hand covering her mouth. The crowd was still. And for the first time in years, they all looked at me and saw me. The silence after my words was unlike any silence I had ever stood inside. It wasn't empty. It was thick, like fog. People weren't just quiet. They were holding their breath. Rachel didn't move. She looked as if someone had turned her into a porcelain version of herself. One more blink, and she might crack. Her fiancé, Daniel, placed a hand gently on her back, but she didn't react. I stepped down from the center. I didn't want applause. I didn't want tears. I just wanted the truth to exist where the lie had been sitting all these years. I returned to my seat, and Judith reached out to squeeze my hand. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she stopped herself. She just nodded. The DJ, uncertain, let the silence sit a moment longer before restarting the soft jazz track that had been playing earlier. The volume was lower now, the air thinner. Conversations resumed, but they were hushed, like something sacred had just happened, and no one was sure how to speak around it. I didn't eat anymore. My appetite had vanished, not from nerves but from relief. A strange, dry relief that made my hands tremble on the inside. I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Rachel had stood up and was walking briskly out the side door. Daniel hesitated, then followed. They disappeared behind the velvet curtain that led to the hallway. I wasn't going to chase her. Not tonight. I had already done enough chasing in my life. But after a few minutes, I found myself standing anyway. Not with anger, not to confront, but to understand. I walked out the side door quietly. The hallway was lit in soft yellow. I followed the faint sound of their voices toward the coat room. The door was slightly open. She planned that, Rachel was saying, her voice sharp and shaking. She humiliated me. Daniel's voice was calm. It was a video of you calling her the best sister in the world. Yeah, when I was 6. People change. She didn't say anything cruel. She showed what happened. What you said. Rachel didn't answer. I didn't open the door farther. I just stood still. Invisible. She went on. You don't get it. Maya always got attention. When Dad left, it was like she inherited the sadness. Everyone looked at her like she was tragic and brave. I was just there, Daniel said softly. You were a child. So was she. A pause. I needed space. Rachel added. I needed to be more than her little sister. And when I finally started getting seen, it felt good. And then the story just kept going. And it became easier to let people believe I'd been alone, because that made me the brave one. I closed my eyes. I didn't hate her, she whispered. I just needed to feel like someone too. That was enough. I walked back to the ballroom, unnoticed. Aunt Melody cornered me by the punch table. Well, that was dramatic, she said. raising one penciled eyebrow. I didn't respond. I always thought you were too quiet for your own good. She continued. But that clip, it was touching. Who filmed it? I shrugged. My old camcorder. I used to record us almost every day. She asked me to, said she wanted to remember everything. Melody nodded and floated off. For the rest of the evening, people approached me in quiet pairs. A cousin I hadn't seen since high school hugged me and whispered, "I never knew." One of Rachel's bridesmaids came by, looking guilty, saying, "You were the one who made the costumes for her recitals. Weren't you?" I thought that was her mom. Even Brenda, the woman from the check-in desk, gave me a sheepish smile and said, "I'm really sorry. Ms. Ellis, you should have been on the list." I nodded. It happens. By the end of the night, I was exhausted. I didn't stay for cake. I didn't want photos. I slipped out just before the bouquet toss. Outside, the sky had deepened into indigo. The sidewalk was slick from a light mist. I walked to my car and sat in the front seat with the door open for a moment, just breathing. I was about to start the engine when I heard a knock on the window. Rachel. I rolled it down. She looked less polished now, her makeup slightly smudged, her earrings gone. She clutched a shawl over her bare shoulders. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded and pushed the passenger door open. She sat in silence for a long moment, fiddling with the edge of her shawl. "Finally," she said. "I didn't know you still had that video. I kept all of them," I said. "Even the one where you spilled grape juice on my laptop." She smiled faintly. "I was so mad at you that day," she murmured. "But then you cried because I was crying. That sounds about right." She looked out the windshield. "You didn't deserve what I said tonight, or what I let people believe." "No," I said gently. "But I get why you did it." "I told myself you left," she whispered. "But you didn't." "I did. I didn't say anything. You were always the one holding the pieces," she continued. "And I wanted to be something without your shadow. I didn't think it would cost this much." I turned to her. "Rachel, I wasn't trying to hurt you tonight. I just couldn't sit there and be erased again." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know." A pause. "I don't want to go into marriage with lies behind me," she said. "So if you want it, I'll tell the truth. To everyone." I shook my head. "You don't need to tell everyone. Just stop pretending I wasn't there." She looked down at her hands. "I'm scared if I tell the truth, they'll love me less." "They won't," I said. "But even if they do, you'll love yourself more." That made her cry. She reached out and gripped my hand. "Come to the wedding," I smiled. "Only if I get to pick the playlist. Deal?" We sat there like that, holding the silence between us like a shared secret that had finally been let out to breathe. The mist outside had stopped. The windshield shimmered with tiny droplets catching streetlight like stars. The next few weeks passed in a strange, quiet thaw. Not a sudden burst of warmth, but the kind of slow melting you don't notice until puddles start appearing where snow used to be. Rachel didn't call every day, but when she did, she didn't sound rehearsed. There was no high pitch in her voice trying to convince the world she was fine. Sometimes, she asked about childhood memories, things she had forgotten. "Did we really make Mom breakfast in bed every Sunday for that year?" she once asked. "Only when she wasn't too sick to eat," I answered. She was silent for a beat. Then, "You always remembered the hard parts." I think I buried them. I didn't have the luxury to forget. "Another time," she said. "I told Daniel everything. He didn't say much, but he held my hand the whole time. That was enough." I wasn't sure if we were healing or just quietly rearranging the past, but I stopped flinching when her name lit up my phone. That, I decided, was something. Then one day she sent a text. "Hey, I want you to come dress shopping with me. Just us. Like when we were little and used to pretend we were fairy queens." I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I replied, "Okay, as long as I don't have to wear heels." We met on a chilly Thursday morning at a boutique in the city, one of those places where the walls are white, the music is classical, and the consultants speak in whispers. She hugged me before we walked in. Not a stiff, apologetic hug, but a soft, lingering one. Inside, the consultant Maria greeted us with warm eyes and offered mimosas. Rachel declined, saying she wanted a clear head. I took one. As Maria led us into the back, she turned and asked, "So, sisters?" Rachel smiled. "Yes. My big sister raised me, actually." The words were casual, but I felt them land in my chest like sunlight. We sat on the tufted bench while she tried on dresses. She disappeared behind the curtain, and I sipped my drink, watching the empty platform. From behind the fabric, her voice floated out. "Do you remember that time I locked myself in the bathroom for hours because I thought I was turning into a butterfly?" I laughed. "Yes. You wrapped yourself in a blanket and screamed if anyone tried to help. You were the only one who waited outside the door the whole time. You didn't even knock. You just waited. I figured you'd come out when you were ready." She stepped out wearing a satin A-line gown with delicate embroidery around the waist. I blinked. It was the first time since we were kids that I saw her, and thought, there she is. She turned slowly in the mirror. Her eyes met mine. "Well, you look like the version of yourself that always lived in your imagination," I said. Rachel laughed, but there were tears. "This is the one." Maria clapped softly, beaming, as Rachel changed. I walked around the boutique and stopped in front of a small table of bridal accessories. A photo frame caught my eye, 2 little girls in matching dresses. It reminded me of us. A buried image rose up, Rachel clinging to my leg as I walked her to her first day of kindergarten, crying because she didn't want to leave my side. Back then, I used to braid her hair every morning, even when I was late for school. I'd pack her lunch with notes. "You're brave. You are loved. You are not alone." And yet, somewhere along the way, she had rewritten it. Not out of cruelty, but out of hunger to be seen not as someone's shadow, but as her own light. When she came out again, back in her jeans and coat, she handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a bracelet, thin gold, with a charm in the shape of a butterfly. "I had it made," she said, "to remind me of the time you waited outside that door, even when I was unbearable, even when I didn't deserve it." I smiled, suddenly unsure what to say. "I want you to be my maid of honor," she said quietly. I blinked. "Rachel, not because it's expected, because no one else could ever be that for me." I nodded, too choked up to speak. The weeks that followed were filled with soft gestures and tentative laughter. I helped with invitation wording, seating charts, music playlists. When Mom called to confirm the flower delivery, she asked to speak to me, not Rachel. "Your sister said you'd know what colors would go best," Mom said on the phone. I paused. "She asked you to check with me." "Yes," she said. "Maya will make it elegant. She always does." I stared at the wall for a moment after the call ended. The weight of so many unseen years shifted, just slightly, from my shoulders. The wedding rehearsal arrived on a pale afternoon. The venue was a restored old theater, grand but intimate. Velvet seats, arched ceilings, long aisles. I walked through it with the planner, helping coordinate where each guest would sit. Rachel came up behind me, holding her dress in a garment bag. "Do you want to see it again?" she asked. I nodded. She unzipped it and let me run my hand over the fabric. It was real. Everything now felt real. That night, as we gathered in the dressing rooms, she pulled out a second USB. "I want to play a different video at the reception," she said. I looked at her, curious. "It's not of me this time," she said. "It's of you. I found all those clips from your high school projects. The one where you stayed up for days editing that documentary on single mothers. The one you filmed on a broken tripod." I laughed. That tripod barely stood up. The camera kept tilting left. Rachel grinned. But the video made Mom cry. I remember. She watched it 3 times. "I found the footage again. I want everyone to see it." "Why?" "Because I want them to know who you are." I opened my mouth to respond, but she spoke first. "For so long, I let them think I survived alone. But I didn't. I survived because of you. And they should know that." The next day, when she walked down the aisle, I stood beside her. Not behind, not in the wings. Right there, holding her bouquet until her hands were ready to carry it herself. When the reception began and the screen lit up, the crowd watched a younger me interviewing women at shelters, setting up lights in the rain, holding a camera with bare, frozen fingers. Rachel narrated over the footage. "This is the sister who gave me everything: time, love, silence when I needed it, and truth when I didn't want it. She never asked for credit, but I'm giving it now." People stood, not clapping, standing, in recognition. And I felt the strange ache of being fully seen, not just for what I'd endured, but for what I had given. When I looked at Rachel, she was crying, not from regret, from relief. That was when I finally exhaled, the kind of breath you didn't realize you were holding your whole life. The wedding ended not with fanfare, but with a kind of quiet reverence. People lingered, not because of the food or music, but because something unspeakable had happened between us. Something raw and fragile that everyone had witnessed, but no one dared name. After the final dance, I stood alone near the stage, running my fingers along the velvet curtain. I'd always found comfort in old theaters, their dusty corners and peeling gold trim. They reminded me of things forgotten, yet still standing. Rachel found me there. She didn't speak right away, just stood beside me, both of us watching the shadows deepen as the lights dimmed. "I used to think love was loud," she said finally, "that if people didn't see it, it didn't count." I turned to her. And now I know the loudest love is the kind that never needed applause. I smiled faintly. "You always wanted a stage. I never did. But I'm glad we both ended up here." She leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when we were little, pretending we were queens watching over our invisible kingdom. It was the smallest gesture, but it reached all the way back through time. Afterward, the cleanup began. Waitstaff cleared plates, vendors packed equipment, and guests drifted out in clusters. I stayed behind, folding extra linens with the coordinator, just to have something to do with my hands. Walter, the groom's father, approached me as I was tying a final bow on a centerpiece box. "You know," he said, "I've been to a lot of weddings. Doctors, lawyers, even a politician's kid once. But this," he paused, gesturing toward the emptying room. "This was the first time I saw truth walk down the aisle." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. He added, "The publishing house I chair is expanding. We're looking for someone who can oversee personal memoirs, editors with emotional intelligence, quiet vision." He held out his card. "I hope you'll consider it." I took the card, stunned. "Thank you." Rachel walked over just as he left, eyebrows raised. "Did you just get offered a job I think I did?" She grinned. "You know, if you take that, You might finally let people see your name on the cover. I like the shadows, I said softly, but maybe they're not where I belong anymore. Outside. It had started to rain, a soft, moody drizzle that blurred the city lights. I walked Rachel to the car. Daniel was already waiting in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone. Rachel paused before getting in. You know, she said, for a long time, I thought growing up meant choosing who to cut out, but now I think it means choosing who you're willing to fight for again and again. I nodded, and knowing when to stop fighting too. She hugged me again, this time longer, tighter. When they drove off, I stood there for a moment under the street lamp. Rain softened my hair, made my dress cling to my arms, but I didn't move. I felt rooted, not stuck anchored. There was a difference. The days after the wedding were quieter, my inbox filled with messages from guests, old friends, and strangers who had seen the video when it began circulating online. One email stood out. I haven't spoken to my sister in 12 years. After watching your story, I reached out. I just wanted to say thank you. Another. It reminded me of how easy it is to rewrite someone else's silence. I've done that to my brother. I'm sorry. I responded to everyone. Rachel and I didn't talk daily, but we no longer avoided each other. We sent photos, inside jokes, music links. She sent me a photo one day of the butterfly bracelet around her wrist. Her caption just one word. Still, a few weeks later, I was packing for a short work retreat when a call came through. Mom. Hey, I said cautiously. Her voice cracked. I watched the video, the one you made, the one where Rachel says you gave her everything. I waited. I knew. She said, back then, I knew what you were doing. I just couldn't say it. I was so deep in my own grief that I let you become the parent. I did what needed to be done. I never thanked you. You don't have to. But I will. She exhaled. You were never invisible to me, Maya. I just wasn't strong enough to look directly at what I'd left to you. I closed my eyes. We all survived in different ways. She sniffled. Can we have dinner soon? Just you and me? Yes, I said. We can. The publishing house followed through. I was hired as a senior editor for memoirs, working with authors who didn't know how to turn their pain into words. I taught them to sit inside the silence long enough for the shape of the truth to emerge. Quiet vision, Walter had called it. For the first time, I started writing my own story, too. Not for a bestseller, not for redemption, just for the record. One spring morning, Rachel and I sat in a small cafe near the park. The trees were in bloom, those early blush petals that always felt like promises. She pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a black and white photo of us as kids, sitting on the stoop, both of us with scraped knees and big grins. On the back, she'd written, You didn't abandon me. I abandoned the memory of you. I'm bringing it back. I looked up. You kept this. I found it in Mom's photo box. It had your handwriting on the back. You wrote, She's going to change the world someday. You were 6. I still might, she said with a grin. We laughed. Later, as we walked through the park, she asked me, Do you think people can ever really see someone without first losing them? I thought for a moment. Maybe we don't need to be fully seen all the time. I said, Maybe it's enough to know we're remembered the right way. We passed a child skipping stones in a pond. Her mother watched nearby, calm, unhurried. The stone made soft ripples that expanded gently across the water. I used to think healing came with some grand finale, a moment where everything made sense. But now, standing beside the sister I'd once nearly lost, I realized it wasn't clarity I needed. It was continuity, the small return, the steady knowing that some truths, once spoken, Stay spoken. That's what matters. And that's what lasts.